welcome to the Spotlight. Thank you to all our listeners for tuning in.
We're calling today's episode
Put Your Rights in the Spotlight,
an awareness podcast for rights of persons with disability.
This is your host, Hannah.
And this is your co-host, Chebs.
I hope you've all subscribed and tuned in to the previous episodes. Chebs and I definitely enjoyed them.
We sure did. How about you tell us a bit about what we'll be talking about in today's episode, Hannah?
Well, today's episode is very interesting. You guys, we will be shedding the spotlight on the rights of PWDs that all citizens should be aware of. PWDs have legal and social rights just like anyone else, and they and the rest of the society should be aware of how to protect them.
Agreed ako dyan, Hannah. So in line with today's discussion, we invited some special guests who will be sharing their experiences and knowledge. We're being joined today by Attorney Gabriel Alfonso C. Enriquez, a corporate legal counsel for the Manila Electric Company. Attorney Enriquez finished his legal degree at San Beda College, Alabang School of Law, and was admitted as a member of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines in 2015. As a legal practitioner, he has served with the House of Representatives, several firms, and under a private corporation. He has successfully honed his skills in several fields of law, such as remedial and corporate practice. Thanks for joining us today, Attorney Enriquez.
And of course, thank you for inviting me. As I personally think that this discussion is not only interesting but relevant, especially with today's circumstances. So again, thank you very much for making me part of this.
We're so much honored, talaga po, Attorney Enriquez. And we also have today Mrs. Elizabeth Jimenez, previously an educator in LaSalle Green Hills, and now a mathematics textbook writer at Sibs Publishing House Incorporated, together with her daughter, who is a 28-year-old PWD, Miss Eliza May Jimenez, who goes by her nickname, Candy.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much, Attorney Enriquez and Mrs. Jimenez. We appreciate you all for being here. Now, to everybody listening to our podcast, we will hear more from our guests in a little while. So, Chebs, to formally start the topic for this podcast, did you know that in the Philippines, the 2010 National Census found 1,442,586 disabled people, or approximately 1.57% of the population of 92.1 million?
Well, that's interesting to know, Hannah. We should really acknowledge that PWDs have a place in our society.
That's true. However, let's face it, with the current issues in the Philippine society, it's quite alarming how people still don't have enough awareness about the rights of our persons with disabilities.
Yeah, and so let's elaborate a little bit more on who PWDs are. So, according to Republic Act 7277, a person with disability is a person who, as a result of a mental, physical, or sensory disability, is restricted or limited in their ability to do an activity in a manner or within the range considered normal for a human being.
Now, to add to what Cheb said earlier, the 2006 United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities considers disability as an evolving concept, and it emerges from the interaction of people with disabilities with psychological and environmental barriers that prevent them from fully participating in society on an equitable basis with the others.
Yes, Hannah. And we can understand more about such issues when we hear from our guest speakers. But before that, let's start this topic on a brighter note, Hannah.
Yes, on a brighter note, definitely, Chebs. Well, did you know that several businesses and establishments here in our own country, the Philippines, are now hiring persons with disabilities?
Yes, some famous restaurants like Fruita's Juice Bar, LA Rolled Ice Cream, and Overdose actually advertise PWD hiring in service of their customers.
That's right. And some of the businesses like the Happy Project that creates travel pouches and Project Lily Philippines, known for their eco uling, employ teams of PWDs to integrate them into the workforce and into the society.
It's wonderful that these businesses are taking the initiative in remodeling the Philippine work system through inclusion. Our guest attorney Enriquez can share with us a little bit about or a little about laws that provide for the employment of PWDs. So, attorney, can you tell us more about this?
Oh, of course, of course. Again, thank you guys for inviting me, and I'd be happy to share whatever little knowledge that I have, so that we can again do this for awareness and to better the rights of our brothers and sisters with different abilities. So, if we skim through the laws already, it's easy. You can find it in the internet. You will find that there are already a lot of laws enacted, but for purposes of the discussions today, specifically on employment, we can stick to the fundamental rights of a persons with disabilities, and these are Executive Order Number 417 and its implementing rules and regulations. Of course, the Magna Carta for Disabled Persons, RA number 7277, and the implementing rules and regulations for Republic Act number 10524. So don't worry, I will go through each one and indicate their specific titles for easy memory recall. And for those who have questions, please feel free to raise them in between my discussion here. So let's start first with Executive Order number 417, or what is entitled as Directing the Implementation of the Economic Independence Program for Persons with Disabilities. Now, this law, or for brevity, let's just refer it to EO number 417. Okay, so this law was enacted or created for the main purpose of mandating all government offices and instrumentalities to support the economic independence of persons with disabilities. What is economic independence? So under the implementing rules and regulations of said EO, it's defined as a quality of life that is characterized by autonomy, dignity, sustainability, full access to resources, services, and support likewise provided to the general population. So in gist, the law or the government of the Philippines rather simply aims to place a person with disability in equal footing with the general population so that they can have equal rights to enjoy everything that everyone is enjoying. So how does it aim to achieve these? Again, under Executive Order number 417, several rights are mentioned there, but we'll only pick out those related to employment. So first would be the provision of trainings for persons with disabilities. These are through enhancement of social and vocational skills. Now, under the implementing rules and regulations, it provides that a said skills enhancement will be achieved by the DepEd, the CHED, and TESDA. So, and of course, the Department of Trade and Industry. So there are two types of skills trainings programs. One is a system of equivalency, and this will be done to ensure that our friends with disabilities can have access to gainful employment. And the second, which I think is really relevant now, and it's also called relevant skills and entrepreneurship trainings. The aim here is to provide PWDs with trainings that are tailor fit to the existing employment status or opportunities of the current economy. So if you apply that to today's circumstances, said training should be geared towards anything that is online, maybe online selling, information technology, or somewhere to that nature, so that our friends with this disabilities or different abilities can be relevant and can make a living out of the current circumstances. The next would be the government's mandates for the provision of accessible work centers. Now, accessible work centers are areas where persons with disabilities, where they can seek job counseling, guidance, referral services, physical and mental rehabilitation, vocational and job and other on-the-job trainings. And as provided under the law, these work centers should be located all around the Philippines since the Department of Public Works and Highways and the HUDCC conducted inventories of unused government buildings for free temporary usage to be converted as work centers. So maybe with a little research, we can search for those work centers nearest to all of us. And also, lastly, under EO 417, it provides and it mandates that every government office and instrumentality engage the services of a PWD and PWD cooperatives and associations when applicable.
Question po,
Okay.
attorney.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yung sa executive order po na 417, di ba? You said a while ago na they may training po, tapos yung sa mga persons with disabilities, does the government provide financial aid?
Yes,
Or,
yes,
oh,
because
that's good.
yes po, lalo na with TESDA. Because TESDA, as you know, ano naman po you just have to register, especially if you're qualified, be the qualifications in this manner, in this case being a person with disability, then the training should be free of charge. But please note that in this case, we are talking about government facilities. It's different when it's private. When if it's a private entity, then there should be contracts between the government and the private entity as regards to funding. But that will be subject to other discussions. But for this EO 417, yes, that should be free.
Okay po. Thank you po, attorney.
Mm-mm. Okay, so next we proceed to the Magna Carta for disabled persons. And again, we really, really encourage you to read this law because this is the fundamental right of a person with disability, not only on employment, but on healthcare, even on accessibility to structures, buildings, and even discrimination. But for the purpose of access of our discussion, we will just stick to those related to employment. So here we will zoom in on Title 2, Chapter 1 of said law. So first of all, the Magna Carta mandates that each person with disability have the opportunity for suitable employment. What is this? So this is what the intent here is for every person with disability to have the same benefit as that of an equal employee or equally ranked employee who does not have the said disability, as long as said person with disability is qualified for the said job. So simply, just similar to EO 417, it seeks to place a person with disability in equal footing with the general population as long as they are equally qualified. So it's basically equality. Now, if a person with disability is unable to find suitable employment, and so that he can or she can still be supported, the Magna Carta also mandates that they should be provided with sheltered employment. Now, what is sheltered employment? Sheltered employment is actually an income producing, basically, it is a controlled environment where a person with disability is provided with income producing projects, homework schemes, with the main intent of simulating an actual job so that said person with disability, when still not qualified for a suitable employment, can be trained, can be developed, and will also be paid so that he can survive the day to day until he can already possess all the skills to be qualified for a employment. So basically, they're still covered in that way. Next, under the Magna Carta, it now allows person with disabilities to be hired as apprentice or learners. Now, what is an apprentice or a learner? They are basically just on-the-job training, where said person with disability will be given the skills and the opportunity to learn the skills and to earn the qualifications, so that subsequently he or she can be thus qualified for the job being applied for. Now, what is important to note here is that said apprenticeship or learner should only last for 6 months, not less than 3 months, but not more than 6 months. Why is this important? Well, this is important because the pay of an apprentice or learner is smaller or lesser than that of a regular employee. Thus, if a employer accepts an apprentice or a person with disability as an apprentice or a learner, he can only treat said person as an apprentice or learner for 6 months. And after that, if he still chooses to keep said person with disability as part of his workforce, he should already then regularize said person, giving him the same benefits as those equally placed employees. And again, if said employer wishes not to continue the services of said person with disability, they should first provide proof to the Department of Labor and Employment a justification why said employer considers said person with disability not qualified for the job being applied for. Okay,
So,
so
equal din naman po pala, attorney. It's fair enough na they have to submit the reasons kung bakit hindi qualified ang isang person. So, insert po ako ng question konti, attorney. Okay lang
mm,
po ba yun?
of course, of
So,
course.
so yung may fixed mandated na qualifications po ba yung yung sa person with disability na mag-apply na naka-state na sa Magna Carta, or does each establishment make their own qualifications, then i-pass and check if yun na ba yun, tama na ba yun, or equal or fair enough
Ah,
na ba yun?
Actually, ma'am, yes, there are specific qualifications that must be met by the person with disability to be able to qualify. However, this is already also in addition to the specific position being applied for. Actually, that is being
Mm.
discussed here in Republic Act 9442, which we can discuss later on in detail if that's okay with you. But yes, ma'am, that's a very good question, because what we want to avoid here, actually, or what the government wants to avoid, is putting um standards too high, or illusory standards that actually just makes it difficult or even impossible for a person with disability to have employment.
Mm.
So that basically what the aim here is, the qualification should only be relating to the job, and
Mm.
if the disability has no relation to the job, then it should not even be considered as part of the interview process. In fact, during interviews with for job employment, a person with disability can either give consent or refuse to give consent to be asked about his previous health condition, especially when it is not related to the position being applied for.
Mm. That's nice to hear po, attorney, no? Lalong-lalo na
Mm-mm.
sa with our listeners kasi it's in-depth na po talaga. And this is something na mahirap i-research. And this is something na mahirap din i-explain kasi iba-iba. So, thank you po for answering my question, attorney. I really appreciate po. Thank you po.
Of course, of course. And of course, before we finish, please allow me to later on to give you the specific requirements so that our listeners can have a basis on what to expect when they will proceed with interviews. Okay? So,
Yes po.
moving on under the Magna Carta, one other benefit that it provides to our person with disabilities is not only trainings, not only ability to be employed, but also making them an asset even before they actually work. And why is this so? Because the Magna Carta provides incentives for employers who engage persons with disabilities. And mind you, the incentives are actually quite formidable. So let me please just try to explain it very quickly so that our listeners, who those who are persons with disabilities, and those who are maybe relatives to persons with disabilities, and also employers who want to seek or want to engage them, will be attracted to do so. So first is, if an employer engages a person with disability, he can then get an additional deduction from his gross income equivalent to 25% of the total amount paid of salaries and wages to the person with disabilities who is a regular employee and even an apprentice or learner. So basically, if an employer engages a person with disability as a regular employee or apprentice or learner, an example, if he pays him, let's just make it an easy number because I am weak with numbers, 100,000, and he can get 25% of that amount, which is 25,000 pesos, and deduct it from his gross income. So bale, liliit po ang taxes niya. So that's the additional
Mm.
incentive there. He can actually make the tax lower. In addition, if an employer actually modifies his facility and the modification effectively makes the life of person with disability working there better, then he can get 50% of the total cost of the modification and deduct it from his net taxable income. So if his net taxable income for that year is 1 million pesos, and let's say the employer also spent 1 million pesos on renovations, then he can get half of that, which is 500,000, minus it from his net taxable income, and effectively, liliit po yung taxes niya. So in this case, naging asset na po din ang person with disability, and that is very, very, very good to hear.
Mm.
So, as regards the qualifications that you mentioned a while ago, let me just go over it quickly kasi po hindi naman po siya ganun kahaba no. So basically, this is under Republic Act number 10524. Actually, it's implementing rules and regulations. Please allow me to specify that the mandate to engage government to engage person with disabilities is both for government agencies and for private corporations. So for government agencies, there's already a mandate that 1% of all regular and non-regular positions in all government agencies should already be reserved for persons with disabilities. No, so again, 1% of all positions. So that should be given to the person with disabilities as long as they comply with the qualifications. And with the private corporations, there's also a mandate that when they exceed 100 employees, then they can already hire or at least reserve a portion of their workforce for persons with disabilities. Now, mind you, there is no penal provision here if the private corporation does not want to hire a person with disability.
Mhm.
However, since the incentive, as we discussed a while ago, is very attractive, then there is no reason why they wouldn't. And again,
Mhm.
if our minds are just open, as my mother, who is a special education teacher, told me, given rights, the proper rights and the proper encouragement, persons with disabilities are not only assets of societies, but they can actually lead. So it's very good to discuss their qualifications. So under Rule 5 of Section 8 of said Republic Act, the following qualifications must be complied by the person with disability to be able to be qualified for said positions. First, they should pass the qualification standards established for the position. Now, it's very general. Why? Because it depends on the position being applied for. But in this case, we don't have to worry, especially in government agencies, because the qualifications per position is already provided in the civil service. So this cannot be invented or modified just because a person is with disability. So it would still
Mhm.
be fair. Next is pass the screening and evaluation by the concerned agencies and selection board. So if you notice, it's still the same as that of
Mm-mm.
a person with not having said disability. And for non-career positions, meaning for those which do not require civil service examinations, which include casual employees, they should merely pass all the requirements except for the civil service eligibility exams, except if you are a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, which requires that you have to pass the board or the bar. And again, if you think about it, it has nothing to do with a disability. It just has to do if you're capable to do the job or not, which I know for a fact that I have a lot of friends with disabilities who are even way smarter and more capable than I am. Lastly, the non-discrimination provisions under the Magna Carta. Under the Magna Carta, there should be no discrimination against a qualified person with disability. Again, this is with hiring, no?
Mhm.
So no discrimination against choosing, screening, and hiring of a person with disabilities. And please allow me to go through quickly acts which are considered discrimination so that if our listeners experience any of these, then they know that they are already suffering discrimination and can already file a complaint under this law. So one would be limiting, segregating, or classifying a disabled job applicant in a manner that adversely affects his work opportunities. Next is using of non-job related qualification standards that screen out or even just tend to screen out a person with disability. using standards, criteria, or methods that discriminate against disability, providing less compensation for a person with disability. I mean, when hiring, no, ang ino-offer po, no, is like way smaller or smaller than a person of equal naman qualifications, or reassigning or transferring a person with disability to a job or position he cannot perform by reason of disability. So meaning, if you already hired a person or a person with disability for a certain job and he can do it, you cannot transfer him to another job which basically limits him or her from doing that job. That's actually not allowed. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, under the labor code, kasi pwede yun. You can actually transfer an employee from one job to another under management prerogative as long as there's no diminution of benefits. But in this
Mm-hmm.
case, you can't do so if there is a physical limitation.
Mm-hmm.
Next is dismissal of employee by reason of disability and excluding a person with disability from labor unions or other legitimate labor organizations. So, oh yes, so for now, that is the laws which gives a person with a disability the fundamental right, equal access to employment, to be treated properly during employment, and even to be promoted during employment.
Thank you so much for that thorough discussion, attorney. And I really, really appreciate how you highlighted how these three laws you've mentioned earlier emphasize that PWDs should have equal footing with the general public, with the rest of us in the community. This just
Mm-hmm.
shows that um, they are actually valued talaga in our society. It's just that kulang pa yung awareness with regards to the laws that
Tama,
actually
tama.
actually parang protect them with all forms of discrimination, and also in regards to the provision of benefits in relation to them. Again, thank you
Correct.
so much for that thorough discussion, attorney. I believe our audience in this podcast has learned a lot. Now, going back to attorney's statement, I believe attorney has already discussed about discrimination. And with relation to that, it is indeed alarming that despite many awareness initiatives about PWDs and their rights, they continue to experience such issues, such problems. They experience such stigma in the community. Now, over here, we have Mrs. Jimenez. She is here to share with us her experience during times wherein her daughter, Candy, also experienced discrimination, social stigma, and how her family dealt with such incident. So, Mrs. Jimenez, good evening. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be with us tonight.
Hi, good evening again. Well, I want to look at it on a positive side. She is always a baby for all of us in the family. It was difficult when she was still a child and starting to play and socialize. She was very hyperactive then. So when we go to malls, playgrounds, or attend gatherings, and on top of it all, we take public transportation. So we had to be very attentive to her moves because in the blink of an eye, she could disappear from our sight or cause damage to anything or hurt another child. I felt like we need to explain to everyone her condition. Very seldom that I would hear comments or remarks, but the way they look at Candy to me means they sense something is not normal. So I had this tendency to explain about her condition even before they start to make remarks. I cannot call it a social injustice. I just want to call them as the challenges of having a child like Candy or who has a disability like Candy.
Okay, so it's good, ma'am, that you mentioned earlier how you're trying to see it in a positive light. You said na this is actually not social injustice per se, but these are just challenges of having a child like Candy.
Yes po, kasi having that positive mindset po, it will affect you as the primary caregiver, and grabe yung support na maibibigay mo sa child niyo. And kaya nga po, I salute all parents, especially mothers, whether PWD or hindi. Kasi iba yung mother's love eh. It's important for us na we have this positive outlook in life para hindi madagdagan yung nare-receive na discrimination or yung stress or yung stigma dun sa significant person natin who is in this situation. So
That's right, Chebs. And I would also like to add na parang, di ba, Ma'am Jimenez said earlier na she just looks at this situation as challenges to having a child like Candy. But we want to let the audience know din, Ma'am Jimenez, di ba po, na at Candy's age right now, she's 28 years old, ma'am. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, she's 28, and I believe she's been diagnosed with mild autism when she was 8. Can you tell our audience right now, ma'am, sa pinagdaanan nyo or your journey, how with regards to her achievements, kumbaga, I think Candy has had a lot of achievements when she started school up until now. So can you share it to us, ma'am, to the audience?
Yes. From the time our Candy was diagnosed with her disability, we have been in regular consultation with our development pedia. So that includes even counseling with us as her parents. The ultimate goal really is to allow her to be independent, and part of being independent is to earn money, at least for her to support herself financially. We supported her interest in culinary arts. So she wants to be a chef. That is the thing that she always expressed to us. So in senior high school, she took technical, vocational, and livelihood, TBL. So before senior high school, we passed through a lot of challenges, and even in school. So we will bring her to regular school and then back again to special school. So until finally she was able to finish junior high school, but we were told that the only option for her is to take TBL. So that was declared by the SPED school. And unfortunately, that school, they do not have any more. They cannot offer any more for our Candy. That's why we have to leave the school. But she was issued certificate that she could enter senior high school in TBL. So after graduating from senior high school, we supported further her interest and enrolled her at Global Academy. I do not know if you are aware of that Global Academy.
I
So
am,
we,
I am, ma'am. Yeah, that is a very
yeah,
popular, actually, for
yes po,
culinary, correct? Oo.
yes. When Candy entered there, this is a new branch here in Dasmariñas, Cavite. So it's very near to our place. We live in Bacoor. So we encountered challenges here because they do not have a training in handling students with special needs or with learning disability. I forgot to mention that during her senior high school, Candy stayed at their dormitory. So that's really an accomplishment for her because she lived there alone. So we would bring her at the dorm Sunday evening, and then we will fetch her Friday afternoon. So she was able to survive that kind of environment. So going back to Global Academy, we were cautioned about the problems that Candy might encounter before they allowed her to enroll. Yes, true enough that it is not that easy. It has been challenging for Candy, for us parents, and I know even for Global Academy. So she finished the requirements, but did not get the diploma because she was not able to undergo the training to work in restaurants, hotels, or any establishment where they send their students for this purpose. So she was issued a certificate instead that she has attended 4 levels of in-house training. So during their culminating activity, we were all happy to see our Candy in that uniform. And I know how happy she was to given that opportunity. So we realized then that she needs to go back to an institution that could help her given her limitations. So we work again with Candent Learning House in BF Las Piñas. Candy has been in Candent since 10 years old. So imagine 10 years old, she's now 20. She left Candent 27 years old. So anyway, it is not continuous. It was on and off. Like when she entered senior high school, we did not have time to go to Candent. She was accepted in Candent as a volunteer worker in the school. So she does clerical works in the office, like encoding and assists teachers and students. I would bring her in the morning and fetch her in the afternoon. So we let her experience the difficulties of commuting or taking public transportation. But after a year, we realized this is not realistic. We cannot take the risk of allowing her to commute that far. If ever she will find a job there after the training, the salary may not compensate even for her expenses. So after many thoughts on how to help our Candy, we remembered Hopewell Integrated School, where Candy used to have a tutorial session in reading. We were newly transferred here in Cavite then, so that's why we look for a school or tutorial center where she can be accommodated. She was happily welcomed by the school administrator. So a plan on how to prepare her for a possible job was discussed with us. Candy worked in the office, same experience at Candent. They started training Candy in taking jeepney in going home. So I bring Candy to school in the morning, and in the afternoon, she is with the teacher taking jeepney. She's paying her own fare, tell the driver where she will get off, those stuff in commuting. Initially, I would wait for her at the gate of the subdivision, but eventually she was able to walk alone from the gate of the subdivision and then to our place. Then she was doing well, and then the pandemic happens. So wala pa po talagang job, yung formal job for her. So we are hoping that after this pandemic, Candy could go back to Hopewell and continue with the training. Yun po.
Wow, that was a really beautiful journey you've shared to us, Ma'am Jimenez. It's nice to know po na despite the challenges that Candy has, she was able to accomplish such things at her age right now. So I believe na she is happy, but more than ever, I know that you, as her parent and her parents, are really, really happy and proud of her. Di ba po, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Mm-mm. Okay, so there was one statement po earlier that really caught my attention. You mentioned that Candy was not able to undergo training to work in restaurants and other places during her stay in Global Academy. Was that right, ma'am? Would you
Yes,
consider
yes.
this po as a sort of parang social difficulty given her disability?
Actually, it's more of yung learning disability. Yeah. The training they are doing in Global Academy, the students, they have to be in their presence of mind and then quick in their actions. You know how it is in the kitchen. I think you already you were able to watch these shows about the cooking shows, about the contest. They work like that. According to the description of the instructor, it is really a kind of military training. So I don't think our Candy can do that. It's very difficult for her to follow a series of instructions. So she was not able to do the actual cooking where she will be alone, the individual demo cooking. So whenever she will do the cooking part, she has to be assisted. So I understand Global Academy for not allowing our Candy to undergo that training. So that one is it's their apprenticeship. So not only it's not only Candy who did not pass. There are also students who are not having any disability like our Candy, but like Candy, they were also issued a certificate. They were not able to complete the training. Yeah.
I understand, ma'am. So they were actually basing it sa parang current skills ni Candy if it would match up with the internship or with going up to the higher level.
Yes, first they have to
Yes.
pass
Okay.
the written exam. It's the
Mm-hmm.
written exam that is very difficult for
Yes.
our Candy. Yes.
But it's still a very, very wonderful achievement to have the certification from Global Academy po, di ba po? It's
Yes.
something that
Yes.
it brings pride to you and your family. So thank you so much again, Ma'am Jimenez, for sharing to us Candy's story and your family's story as well. We are honored that you opened up to our podcast tonight and to actually share your story to the rest of the audience we have. So Cherry, Chebs, do you have any follow-up questions to Ma'am Jimenez?
Ano po, so far nasabi lahat ni Mrs. Jimenez, and like sa nasabi ni Hannah sa akin na we are or sa atin na we are much honored na nag-open up si Mrs. Jimenez sa atin. And it's also a message to all of our listeners na it is a challenge. It is better for us to put it on a positive outlook sa life instead of magdwell tayo dun. Kasi this is something that um, hindi natin makontrol. So, mas makokontrol natin yung the way we approach the situation. And in that way, mas mag-move on tayo. And there's more beyond on it. So, it's good. And we learned a lot sa na-share sa atin ni Mrs. Jimenez. And to continue po, Attorney Enriquez, may laws po ba tayo to protect the rights of PWDs in the workplace or specific laws against discrimination outside the work setting or inside the work setting? Na
Okay.
pwede or hindi pwedeng ma-apply kay Miss Candy and kay Mrs. Jimenez.
Actually, with regard to what Ma'am Jimenez said, and what with what Candy went through, there are actually a lot. And then these are laws which a family member or a loved one or even the person with disability can use so that they can remedy any abuses of their rights. So one would be even actually under the Magna Carta. That's why I explained a while ago that we should really be familiar with the Magna Carta because these are really the fundamental rights of a person with disability. So one would be, as Ma'am Jimenez mentioned a while ago, on commuting. There is a provision here on discrimination on public transportation, on transportation. A public transport actually is prohibited from charging a higher fare or from refusing a person with disability any service just because of his orthopedic device, maybe because it's big or something like that, or personal effects or merchandise, anything related to the disability. So just example, if a person has a wheelchair or crutches, they should not be made to pay a higher fare or a different fare or refuse service just because of that. It should be again equal. Next would be discrimination on the use of public accommodations and services such as in restaurants, in hotels, in public gyms. Now again, if families like Mom Jimenez or other families would want to celebrate a birthday in a restaurant or probably use workout equipments in a gym, the Magna Carta prohibits these institutions or establishment from discriminating against said persons. And for those listening out there, I will just try to enumerate three examples so that you may know if you're already being subjected to discrimination or not. One would be imposition of eligibility criteria that screen out or tend to screen out persons with disabilities from fully enjoying goods, services, and facilities of the entity. An example siguro po, no, would be like if you are not allowed to enter a mall if you have crutches. That is totally irrelevant on why a person would go to the mall, and having a crutch is not even going to disturb any business. So if that's going to happen, or if there's a policy like that, then that is already considered discrimination. Next would be failure to make modifications on policies that are necessary to allow a person with disability to enjoy the same benefits as that of a person who does not have a disability or the same disability. An example here would be if you go to a gym and then they have a policy that you cannot bring your bicycles inside since the wheels are being used outside the gym. This policy should be amended and modified to a person with a wheelchair if he is also using it outside. They should modify it so that said person with disability can still use and enjoy the gym in the same way as that of a person without it. So again, if it is not modified, then that is again discrimination. Next would be failure to remove architectural barriers. Oh, I'm sorry. With number two, they can actually deny entry if there is just causes. And I guess a just cause would be something like what Ma'am Jimenez explained a while ago, when there are basic standards that are not only applicable to a person with disability, but to everybody. Um, so like that. And third is failure to remove architectural barriers and communication barriers that are structural in nature when the removal is readily achievable. Example would be if you're going to use a movie theater and the hallway is filled with standees, and the standees are situated in a manner that makes the hallway very narrow, and a person with a mobile disability will have a hard time or even not be able to enter, and that's considered a discrimination because the standees are readily available, can be removed immediately. However, if the barrier would be like a beam, which is load bearing, that is not readily removable because if you remove that beam, it can actually lead to the collapse of the building. Another discrimination would be, of course, under Republic Act 9442, specifically Section 7 and 8 of Rule 5, and this is very important. This is prohibition against public ridicule and deliverance from vilification. So again, if a person with disability, and mind you, with the previous comedy shows, jokes, humor, if people were only educated on these laws, a lot of people will already be guilty and should be made to pay for the penalty imposed under the law. So again, public ridicule. What is this? It is an act of making fun or contemptuous imitating or making mockery of a person with disability, whether in writing or in words, or in action due to their impairments. The following acts are considered ridicule and thus illegal: making fun even through jokes of a person with disability on account of his or her disability, which results to the embarrassment of such person in front of two or more persons. An example would be a stand-up comedian, and then he will use as object of his humor the disability of a person. Now, if he uses the other features of a person which are not related to a disability, then that's okay. But if it's the disability itself, then that is illegal and considered public ridicule. Next would be making mockery of a person with disability, whether oral or in writing, or imitating a person with disability in public gatherings, stages, shows, carnivals, TV shows, etc. So it is very important for those who are listening, especially if you are teachers or ministers or trainers, that this should be in place because especially in schools, and I don't know, no, ang common po ni Ma'am Jimenez nito, but of course when I was younger, I had classmates who were suffering through disabilities, and sometimes students and classmates are not kind to them. So this should be strictly imposed. Next would be deliverance from vilification. And the difference between public ridicule and vilification is that public ridicule has an element of publicity. It should be done in front of other people. And if it is not done in front of other people, then it shall fall under vilification, which is the utterance of slanderous and abusive statements against a person with disability. And samples of are calling a person by his disability in public, resulting to humiliation, and using the disability of a person as an example in a manner that's embarrassing and humiliating to the dignity of the person with disability. So, with all the listeners here, please, you should stand up for your rights. When you are hurt or when you are injured or when you are embarrassed because of a comment, this is not okay. And there's actually a law protecting you. And for those of age already and who would want to get insurance coverages, especially during these pandemic times, the Insurance Commission actually issued circular letter number 2021-07, actually last year, 2020, which outrightly um, prohibited the declination or refusal of any application to be covered in an insurance policy solely on the ground of a disability. Therefore, the denial should have a justifiable reason, and that reason should not be on the sole ground of the disability, especially if the disability is nowhere near related to the insurance coverage. And there is a fine. There's a penalty if this is violated, which is a fine not exceeding 200,000. So if you experience this, you can actually have these insurance companies penalized, no? Yun.
Mhm. It's wonderful to know more po sa laws that protect our PWDs from other forms of discrimination, attorney. And dahil sa sinabi mo, attorney, may question ako. Are there or how could they take legal actions which PWDs and their families can take?
Okay,
Mm.
very good. I think it's also worthy to differentiate the types of violations per se that can happen. If it is an inaction on the government to provide training, to provide funding, to be honest, there is really no specific violation there because that really depends on the funding or the circumstances of the government, and the law itself does not provide any penalty. However, for rights like rights against discrimination, equal employment, and other rights under the Magna Carta, there are specific, actually steep penalties, and this can be remedied by the person or the relative of the person with disability filing a complaint in court. Now, please allow me to educate everybody on the steep penalty so that we can encourage the persons with disabilities to speak out, and those others who don't have the disability to refrain from making any discrimination. So first, if a person abuses the rights of a person with disability, for the first violation, the court, when found guilty, I mean, when the defendant, when found guilty, shall suffer a fine of not less than 50,000 pesos, but not exceeding 100,000 pesos, or imprisonment for 2 years, from 2 years to 6, but not more than 6 years, at the discretion of the court. So depending on the gravity of what was said, when you file a complaint with the court will determine either fine lang po, preso lang, or both, and then the amount and the period. So that's for the first violation. For the second violation, the fine is higher. So the fine is at minimum of 100,000 but not exceeding 200,000, or imprisonment of not less than 2 years, not more than 6 years, or both. Again, at the discretion of at the discretion of the court. Again, mind you, the incentives, those again, sorry. So that is for those people who abuse persons with disabilities. Now, on the other side, there's also a penalty for those persons who abuses the rights given to the under the Magna Carta. Example, incentives. An employer actually hires one employee who's with disability, and ang nangyari, he declares two. Or a person who pretends to be with disability, but wala pala siyang disability in that aspect. There's actually also a penalty for that kasi equal nga po siya eh. So the penalty is imprisonment of not less than 6 months, or a fine not less than 5,000 pesos, or both. And again, this is very relevant because sometimes, when the violator is a corporation, sometimes we don't know what to do because they're big and then it's hard to run after them. Now, for everybody, we should know that if the violator is a corporation, an organization, or an association, or something similar like that, the person there who shall be liable is the official directly involved in the violation. So if it is, let's say lang, a director of San Miguel Corporation during an event of San Miguel Corporation for, let's say, fun run for persons with disabilities. And I think that's what you call paraplegic Olympics, correct? Parang ganun, And somebody, like in SMC, parang merong statement dun sa banner that is discriminatory or public ridicule. Then then San Miguel can be liable, and the person who shall suffer imprisonment or fine is the official who actually was heading that event, who approved that banner. Okay. The next is, if the violator is a foreigner, this is very important. Said foreigner, if found guilty, should first serve his sentence, whatever the court imposes, either imprisonment or payment of fine, before he is deported. He should never be deported and allowed to serve his sentence abroad. Of course, because we don't know if the treatment will be the same. Again, he should again first serve his sentence here in the Philippines following the same circumstances of other violators in the Philippines, and only after he has already finished said sentence can he be deported back to his country. That's it.
Okay, so that was a thorough and comprehensive discussion from Attorney Enriquez. Again, thank you so much, Attorney. So ayun nga, sabi ni Attorney kanina, we should all stand up for our rights. PWDs man o hindi, we should stand up for our rights because we are protected by the law. We just are not aware. Everybody's not aware. That is why we have this podcast to raise awareness about the rights and laws that could actually protect our friends who are PWDs. So again, thank you so much, Attorney, for that. It is really important not only for our persons, our friends with disabilities, to realize that there are laws that advocate for their inclusion to society, but also for the public to understand that PWDs deserve equality in the society and why they should.
Yes, I totally agree, Hannah. And we must also keep in mind that yung equality should not only be limited to inclusion in the society, but also accessibility of government facilities and other public infrastructures.
Ayun na nga, we're going to the public infrastructures area naman. Attorney Enriquez, is there a law that supports the accessibility of public infrastructures for our friends with disabilities? I think this is related to the law wherein the Secretary of Public Works and Highways shall initiate the strict implementation of BP 344. Am I right,
Correct. That
Attorney?
is correct. Galing.
Okay.
Mas magaling pa kayo sa akin. Kayo na po. I'm happy nga, that actually the law is not just for lawyers, In fact, the law is for non-lawyers. You only get lawyers when somebody broke the law. No, but again, we should always be very familiar with our rights, and you can only find that in the law. So, with regard to the rights of a person with disability and their experiences in infrastructures, yes, tama po no ang host natin. It is under BP 344, specifically under its implementing rules and regulations. Now, under this law, it provides for the minimum requirements and standards to make buildings, facilities, and utilities for public access accessible to persons with disabilities. Of course, we need to know which buildings or which streets or which structures are included here. No? So the scopes are, the scope is public and private buildings and related structures for public use, which are whether already constructed to be repaired or renovated. So like malls, movie theaters, gyms, anything that is open to the public. It doesn't have to be a public building. It can be a private establishment, but for use of the public. Again, like a mall. Well, it also includes streets and highways and other public utilities and public transport vehicles. Now, how is this going to be implemented? Especially for those to be repaired or renovated. Under the law, it provides that no permit or building permit or other permits or franchise for public transport shall be approved unless the contractor or the owner of a building to be repaired or to be built shall give them the plans which already incorporate certain requirements in compliance with BP 344, no, or which what they call the accessibility requirements. In the same way, for public transportation like jeeps, no, boat, airplane, their franchise to certificate of their CPCN, no, certificate of public necessity, or their franchise to operate will not be approved or will not be they will not be issued a certificate or their franchise unless they comply with what is provided here. And what are these requirements? No, for public and private buildings and related structures for public use, there should be it should be a barrier-free facility and with accessibility features. So what are these? The ingress and egress, or the entrance and exits from the street to the building, should be made accessible. And what are these? The ramps, curbs, slopes, drop offs, something like that. So it should be included in their plan when they build the building when applying for a building permit. And then, of course, no, what is common, parking slots for persons with disability shall be located near as possible to the entrance or exit of the building or structure. And I think so far, I don't know, no, in other places, but here in the NCR, this is somewhat being complied with. And of course, they have no choice because they will have no building permit if they do not. For streets, highways, and transports to be constructed, the cutout curbs, and there should be cutout curbs and accessible ramps at sidewalks. I think this is very, very you can see this in BGC kasi when you walk there are already ramps there or railings. And also for streets and public highways, the audio visual aids for crossing. Now I don't know about audio, but I know visual aids in crossing streets are already in place. But I don't know if I think that's the beeping sound when you try to cross the street for people who cannot see that I have not seen yet in the Philippines. But for visual aids, nakikita natin yan. That's like the walk and don't walk sign. Next, for those streets and highways already constructed, only those specific portions which require ramps should be repaired, and it will be repaired by the government. That is a mandate. And for public transport vehicles, and for everybody who commutes, please, we should know this. Again, no license or franchise shall be issued unless there are designated seats for persons with disabilities and audio visual aids. So I don't know how yung mga jeep po natin na bibigyan ng franchise kasi talagang hindi talaga siya in place yung merong seats for persons with disabilities, no? With government-operated trains, airplanes, they should also comply with the designated seats and also visual aids and requirements. So I guess it is already up to us sa experience po natin if nagagawa po to, no? And what is important here is that this is not just a law to be taken lightly because meron po siyang penalty. Actually, the penalty is equivalent or same lang po dun sa Republic Act 7277 sa merong first offense, second offense na may fine or imprisonment or both. And then the difference here is the person's liable. Because here, the person's liable or the persons that should be incarcerated or made to pay the fine is the owner or operator or owner of the building or operator of the franchise, the contractor, the architect, the engineer, or the building official or officer who is in charge of issuing the permits. Example, kung nag-issue siya ng permit, hindi pala nag-comply po, no, sa building requirements, and that building official is liable under this law. So yun po, under 344. And then again, I guess, this already ties up din with the incentive na if, if a employer modifies, no, his structure to be PWD friendly, then he can use the cost herein to deduct from his taxable income, net taxable income. Mm, thank you.
Okay, that's right. I think this law should not be taken lightly para we can provide accessibility to all persons with disabilities. However, attorney, let's move on to the more opinionated side of things. In your opinion, how well is this law implemented in our country?
Well, I think as to structural, this is and I think it depends where you are in the country. No, I think if
Mm-hmm.
you're in more in the city area, like here in Manila, or even in the highly progressive provinces, I think these ones, the structural requirements are being complied with. Kasi again, these buildings, especially the new ones, cannot get a building permit if they do not comply with the requirements herein. However, with regard to transport, oh, I I have yet to see this being fully complied with. Especially that I hear my mother and my sister complain a lot, and their opinion to me is actually relevant to this point because my mother is actually a clinical psychologist. She teaches special education. She has
Mm-hmm.
a school in the province, and she only takes students who need her. And in this aspect, and my sister is a doctor specializing in rehabilitation medicine. So both of them actually give me inputs in their misgivings about how this law is implemented. And I think with transportation, we can do more.
Mm-hmm. There's so
Yeah,
much more to work on po talaga dito sa country
yeah.
natin in terms of the
Uh,
accessibility aspect.
but
That's right.
we are, ano, actually, in structure, actually, in my opinion, I don't know with the opinion of Ma'am Jimenez, but for me, I think somewhat the basic requirements provided here as the structures are being complied with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, as what attorney said, maybe we can ask Ma'am Jimenez. How about you, Ma'am Jimenez? I believe Candy does not have any difficulties with regards to physically accessing facilities and infrastructures. But can you share your own opinion as to how society today provides for those um, individuals or fellow PWDs who are physically disabled? Ma'am Jimenez?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
hearing from Attorney Enriquez, the laws are in place, even the implementing guidelines. Maybe what is needed is a serious information campaign. And for us parents of PWDs, we should deliberately or seriously educate ourselves also on these laws. So it's this talk show or conversation serves as enlightenment for me, being a mother of a PWD. So I am taking note of the laws discussed by Attorney Enriquez, and I need there is really a need for me to educate myself on this law. So I also urge the my co-parents, parents of PWDs, to deliberately educate themselves regarding the laws. So the laws are in place. We really have provision for PWDs.
Yes po, and ang daming alam ni attorney, parang, blow yung mind daming lahat. So, ang galing ni attorney. So, I believe po na there are standard measurements that certain structures should be based on. Correct po, Attorney Enriquez?
Oh, correct. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So,
Mm.
are there efforts being done by the government now to ensure that the specifications of the BP 344 will be thoroughly followed po?
Mm. Actually po, as sabi nga ni Ma'am Jimenez, kaya she noticed that certain structural requirements are being complied with. Kasi the government is strict with releasing permits. When you build kasi build your building or you pave streets or you want to operate a public transport, you have to apply for a building permit for buildings or a certificate of public necessity for operating mga jeepney, mga ganon. They will not issue you your permit or your franchise unless you can show either in your building plan or in your mga cars or mga airplanes the compliance first with this law. So that is po, and then of course the specifications are dependent po on the either the building official or the city engineering office, the plans provided
Mm.
therein po. Yes, kaya strict. Actually, I was able po din to engage in construction before. Uh, Strict po sila when they ask for the building permit, you really have to submit voluminous plans, and part of that po are uh the accessibility requirements under 344. So tama lang nga po si Ma'am. Sana po kasi part of the requirement is the education po ng mga tao, which is not. And I guess yun po yung kulang.
That's true.
Mm-mm.
Kaya nga po, parang eye-opener po talaga yung parang conversation natin with Ma'am Jimenez and Attorney Enriquez tonight kasi we are able to know more about the laws that actually cover our friends with disabilities. Also, this would actually help business owners and those who are planning to start their own business to actually evaluate their facilities and make sure that they follow the rulings according to BP 344 para marilisan sila ng permit. And they could also provide accessibility to our PWDs in the country. Tama,
Yeah.
Chebs?
Yes, Hannah. And it would also be great to see some improvements sa country natin, their way of designing and constructing both public and private facilities soon. And hoping po as an OT na sana pag ginawa nila yon and finalo nila yon, hindi lang something na just to comply, but also to be equal, yung equity and equality yon.
That's right. I'm actually hoping to see Philippines in terms of the accessibility aspect to be at par with other countries kasi there's so much emphasis on accessibility in other countries in the world. So why wouldn't we be able to implement this, 'di ba? So yun, kaya education talaga is key. We have to raise awareness para we can provide accessibility to our friends with disabilities. So now, moving on. So besides the infrastructures, let's move on to the benefits. The benefits of our persons with disabilities. I think we can ask Mrs. Jimenez about this. Ma'am, what can you say about the government making efforts to support persons with disabilities like Candy po?
Candy is enjoying the discounts given to PWDs, and we do not encounter problems in using her PWD card. These are from restaurants, supermarkets, drugstores, even travel agencies, and dental clinics. So she is also accommodated as PWD in banks and other offices where we need to do transaction with. She only started using PWD card in 2016. So since then, we did not encounter any problem. The restaurants, the food chains, they are very generous when it comes to giving discounts. But they are not uniform in giving discounts. Some food chain would be very generous. Some would just strictly ask which one is like if you order which food is the order of is from Candy. In other restaurants, they would choose the most expensive one and they would apply the discount there. So
That's good to know, ma'am, na hindi po kayo nagka-encounter ng any problems in terms of availing the benefits of the PWD card. That's really good to know po. In fact, I think the benefits fall under RA 7277. Is that right, attorney? Yung benefits po for the PWDs, they fall under that particular law po.
7277 po, that's where the big picture is provided, but yung actual application po no, is in Republic Act number 9442. But you're right because it's still naman related to 7277. So if it's okay, no, I know that a lot of persons of disabilities are already able to experience or make use of the discount, but can I specifically provide the rates so that we are aware of at least how much po yung kailangan po bawasan sa bill?
Yes,
No, kasi
definitely, attorney.
okay.
Really
So let's
helpful
start
po.
with healthcare, no? Healthcare. For purchase of medicine, it's actually 20% on discount of the 20% discount on the purchase price. It's not limited to government or whatever. It is mandatory to all establishments that is like drugstores po, who sell medicine. So 20% off the purchase price. Next would be medical and dental privileges in government facilities. Same, 20% discount on medical and dental services, including diagnostic and lab fees. What's different is if you do go to the private hospitals, they're technically the same po, no? 20% discount on medical and dental fees. However, unlike in the government hospitals, when you secure medical fees in a private hospital, the 20% even includes professional fees of attending doctors. So if there are doctors there who will try to make their fees separate from the actual fee, di pwede yun. Or they can do that, but still subject pa rin siya to the 20% discount. And I guess,
Yung mga doctors,
yeah,
sorry po,
may
continue po,
correct, yeah,
attorney.
yung mga doctor yan, makinig kayo. Uhulihin ka. Hindi kasi may
Hulin ka
ibang,
na, attorney
oh,
Enriquez.
may mga ibang doctor na pinapadiretso nila sa secretary nila yung, ano, yung payment, yung hindi dinadaan sa hospital. Eh, the hospital kasi, somewhat, since nagagamit nila as tax deduction yung 20%, automatic po kapag disabled yung pasyente, may minus. Eh, yung doktor minsan, hindi nagba-minus eh. So, kailangan aware tayo dun. And then next would be, exempted po yung persons with disability from value added tax, no? 12%. Kaya if you notice po, no, 32% po ang binabawas, hindi lang 22%. Kasi ang 32, 20% plus 12% po yun when a person with disability avails of medicine purchased from drugstores, and yun po nga, medical and dental services availed. So for those listening, i-check nyo po, i-calculate nyo yung bill, eh kung nabawasan ba ng 32%. But of course, dito, I mean, for medicine. So wag niyo mo isama yung Gatorade sa bill nyo. I-exclude nyo yun. 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 So that's specifically the benefits there for healthcare.
So ano po, attorney, how about specifically po sa mga rehabilitation services like physical, occupational, and speech therapies po?
Yun po. Those are already considered under medical and dental services po, no? Hindi ba po siya considered, no? Tama, no? Kasi medical po siya eh. So, pasok po rin siya kasi napaka-broad ng ano ma'am eh.
Sa
Napaka-broad ng
medical.
oo.
That's good to know po, attorney.
How about we ask din po Mrs. Jimenez about this? Ma'am, did Candy ever avail po of therapy services before or now?
No, it's because we didn't know that Candy can get a PW card then. So I only heard it from my colleague who has a relative with similar disability with Candy. Because yun nga, hindi ko na-educate yung sarili ko about this. So when I heard PWD card, so ang mindset ko is yung physical, with those with physical disabilities. So I didn't know then that my Candy could also get that card for having learning disability. So Candy was not yet a PWD card holder when she had speech and occupational therapy. Sayang, no? So for those parents out there na with PWD na learning disability like my Candy, siguro kung wala pa silang card, PWD card, siguro it will be helpful, very helpful kasi ang mahal din ng mga therapies na ito. Dinaanan namin lahat yan. So, yun. Unfortunately, hindi kami naka-discount. At ngayon, dahil wala pa kaming PWD card. But ngayon, blessing naman na hindi naman kailangan ni Candy ng therapy.
I know for a fact po na there are a lot of PWDs na hindi nga po makapag-avail ng services dahil for financial reasons, and it's undeniable naman po na rehabilitation services are quite costly. So, attorney, alam ko na na-mention mo kanina about the financial aid for the services to the PWDs. If not totally free, alam kong nasa under ba ng Republic Act 7277 yung mga PWDs na entitled for the discounts with the services na pwede nilang matanggap?
Well, under 7277 kasi it's a bit broad. Like general lang yung discussions nila. But if it falls within the definition, yes, it should be part of the discount.
All right. Thank you so much for explaining this, attorney. And also, I would agree with what Ma'am Jimenez said earlier. So to the parents who have children with disabilities, avail na po yung parang PWD card ninyo para makatulong din po sa payments ng inyong therapy services. Kasi nga po, they're very costly. And the discounts really help a lot. Now, this time, just in case our PWDs experience violation of their rights po, which government agencies or organizations can they turn to help po, attorney?
Actually po, you can always go to the regional trial court or mga work centers, but specifically we have this office called the Persons with Disability Affairs Office or the PDAO, no? Pero pangit naman ng PDAO. So PDAO na lang. It is created in every province, city or municipality, so there is no reason why we shouldn't be able to access this, and I think for those listening, especially those with either a family member or one with a disability, we should be familiar with the location of this office. Kasi po yung office nito is, yung purpose niya is to formulate policies and programs to promote welfare for persons with disabilities, coordinate implementation for the VP number 344 as we explained a while ago, and represent persons with disabilities in meetings of the local development councils and other special bodies. Bali sila po yung magre-represent sa kanila sa mga meetings to in the local council so that they can legislate for the rights. And if ever po ma'am, guys, if there is a specific area, LGU, barangay man or city na wala pa pong PDAO or this office, the law actually provides that a focal person, it's similar lang to an appointed person, should be muna appointed in lieu of that office while it is not yet created. So it's either you go to that office or to the focal person, either will still have the same powers and authorities to help said PWD. And of course, as I said, you can always go to your area vocational rehabilitation center. Hopefully, everybody listening will try to research which is the closest to them. And for trainings and improvement, as I said, TESDA po, and CHED or DTI. So those are the institutions. Oh, and of course, with direct violations po, you file your complaint po with the court kung mayroong nagdi-discriminate.
Ayun na nga, ang daming organizations and government agencies na na-mention si attorney. So I'm sure if anybody experiences any forms of discrimination or have any problems or issues with regards to what we discussed earlier, then they could go to these specific organizations.
So looks like this is all the time that we have for today, and I think it would be an understatement to say we learned much today, right, Hannah?
I wholeheartedly agree. I can say we can all take to heart a new perspective on the potential of our PWDs and how the Philippine society can evolve into a much more inclusive and inviting place for all people.
That would really make the world a better place, Hannah. I wish we had more time to talk about this. In case our listeners would want to learn more about the rights of PWDs, are there references or resources that they can access online, Hannah?
Yes, definitely. You can learn more about the details of the laws through our government websites. And also for our YouTube subscribers, you can scan the QR codes flashed on the screen right now. And we will be showing these codes again at the end of the podcast, just in case you missed them.
Perfect. And again, if any of our listeners feel that you are or may have experienced violation of your rights as PWDs, you may turn to the organizations mentioned by attorney a while ago.
Right. Again, thank you so much to all our listeners and of course to our awesome and amazing guests for joining us in this episode. Now, Mrs. Jimenez, would you like to say anything for our listeners out there to encourage them to advocate for PWDs like your daughter? Maybe Candy can say hi to everyone. Hi, Candy.
Good evening.
Good
Good evening, Candy. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Good evening.
Sana po ang mga PWD na katulad ko ay tratuhin po ng maayos ng kapwa. Bigyan po ng tulong kung kinakailangan. Sa mga katulad ko naman po na PWD, maintindihan sana natin na hindi lahat ay kaya nating gawin. Pwede rin naman tayong maging independent pero kailangan natin ng tulong o supervision ng ating
mga mahal sa buhay o pamilya. Yan lamang po. Salamat po.
Thank
Oh,
you
thank
so
you.
much, Candy.
Thank you, Candy.
Thank you.
Apakagaling ng statement na yun, and I would really have to agree. We really have to
Yes.
understand talaga the situation. Also,
Mm.
they would have to understand that they need help din sa kanilang families, kanilang significant others. So how about Mrs. Jimenez, ma'am? Do you have anything to share to our audience before we end our podcast for tonight?
Yes. First, please let us all be considerate of PWD.
Mm.
They are not asking for special treatment, but they must be given the same opportunity as everyone.
Mm.
And second, please always remember that not all disabilities are physical and can be seen. If a person acts differently in public, it will not hurt if we try to understand and not be judgmental. And
Yes.
finally, I hope the government will at least launch a serious information campaign about PWDs and their rights. Maybe they could start in schools. There might be a subject where this information or knowledge about PWDs can be integrated with. And I thank you so much for your invitation. This has been a blessing to me and to Candy. Maraming salamat, especially to Attorney Enriquez. Salamat po sa
Of
inyo.
course po.
Thank you po. Kaya nga po sabi nila, it takes two to tango. And to Attorney Enriquez, who has imparted so much knowledge and awareness, thank you so much for your time to be with
Of
us
course, of
today.
course.
Is there anything else you'd like to add for our listeners, Attorney?
Actually, simple lang po, no? As discussed a while ago, there are already laws in place, organizations ready to implement it. I just encourage everybody to know the rights, and not just knowing it, but also enforcing it and stand up, not only for the people with disability, but also for people who can see discriminations. We should all work together po, and we should apply the law. Thank you.
We all have to know our rights. We all have to stand up for our rights. And as what Ma'am Jimenez said earlier also, your kindness also goes a long way. So let's be considerate, especially if we encounter different types of people. So thank you so much again to our guests, Attorney Enriquez and Ma'am Jimenez, and also to Candy, who shared her advocacy earlier with us. It's an honor to have you with us today. So through this podcast, we encouraged awareness. To everyone listening, awareness is the first step. Now, the next step we have to do is to take action. What we're going to
Yes.
do is to apply what we learned for tonight. So if you know anybody who needs to learn more about this, feel free to share this podcast to your friends, your family, and anyone who needs to listen or learn. Because this actually really could help a lot of people, especially all the individuals here in our country, because awareness is still lacking. We still need more education in terms of this, and we are grateful because we have been given the chance to be educated by Attorney Enriquez as well as by Ma'am Jimenez today. Now there you have it. This officially concludes episode 3 of Spotlight on Air. This has been Hannah,
And Chebs,
wishing all our listeners a great day in the spotlight.
join us again in the next episode of Spotlight on Air.